I'm Clara, 32 years old, and 3 months ago, my company acquired a struggling tech startup. Nothing unusual, except the founder was my brother, Leo. He didn't know, not until Easter dinner, when he stood at the head of the table, bragging about his brilliant exit strategy. Then someone mentioned the buyer, me. The room fell silent. Leo's fork dropped. My parents stared at me. If you've ever lived in the shadow of a sibling who always got the spotlight, you already know how my stomach twisted that night. But that awkward silence, it was only the beginning. Before I take you inside the boardroom and back to the dinner table, let me know where you're tuning in from. And if this story hit you even a little, like, comment, and subscribe. You won't believe what came next. Growing up in Seattle with Leo was like living in a perpetual shadow, a constant background hum of Leo is brilliant. From the moment he built his first clunky computer at 12, hunched over circuit boards in our basement, while I was still happily braiding friendship bracelets and trying to perfect my handstand, a pattern was established. Leo was the tech genius, the prodigy. I was just Clara, the little sister, seemingly always a few steps behind, trying to keep up. I remember showing him a crayon drawing I was incredibly proud of when I was 6. A vibrant, slightly abstract house with a purple roof. "That's nice, Clara," he'd said, his voice laced with that familiar, dismissive tone. It wasn't mean, not exactly, but it made it clear he thought whatever I'd accomplished was child's play. Utterly insignificant compared to his latest triumph with a simple programming script that made a dot bounce across the screen. That dot, in our parents' eyes, was a miracle. My purple house, a pleasant scribble. It wasn't just the early years. When I won the school science fair in 6th grade, a project on solar energy, mind you, with working miniature panels and a fan, I was practically vibrating with pride. I lugged my trifold board home, eager for Leo's approval. He just gestured vaguely at it, already halfway to his room. "Pretty basic, Claire's," he'd shrugged. "Nothing like the programming competition I won this year." Mine actually did something. The sting of that comment was sharp, even now. He had won some regional coding challenge, creating a rudimentary text-based adventure game. And while I was happy for him, his instant comparison, his need to overshadow, was exhausting. Our parents, Thomas and Evelyn, didn't intentionally play favorites. I truly believe that. But they were in awe of Leo's technical abilities. Dad, an accountant who still struggled to program the DVR, looked at Leo like he was speaking another language when he talked about coding, a language of gods and prophets. Mom, a high school English teacher who could dissect Shakespeare with surgical precision, would just smile and nod, clearly impressed, even when she didn't understand a single word of his monologues about algorithms or data structures. "Your brother has a special gift, Clara," they'd tell me, their voices filled with a reverent wonder. "Not everyone thinks that way. He sees the world in numbers and logic." It was always framed as an explanation, a way to understand his brilliance, but it felt like a soft dismissal of my own burgeoning interests, a quiet suggestion that my path was simply less. The pattern continued through high school. I excelled in business classes, organizing school events, leading student government. My strengths were in communication, organization, and understanding group dynamics. I loved the energy of collaboration, the challenge of bringing people together to achieve a common goal. I won leadership awards, earned straight A's in economics, and helped found the school's first student-run charity drive, which raised more money than anyone expected. But those achievements, in the family narrative, always seemed secondary, quiet footnotes to Leo's programming skills and his growing collection of robotics trophies. I remember one year, he built a robot that could solve a Rubik's Cube in under a minute. The local news did a segment on him. Meanwhile, I was getting into prestigious business summer programs, learning about market analysis and strategic planning. My accomplishments were abstract, theoretical. Leo's were tangible, impressive, and deeply technical. When college applications rolled around, the chasm widened further. Leo was accepted to MIT with a partial scholarship for computer science, the pinnacle of tech academia. Our parents were ecstatic, their voices practically vibrating with pride every time they mentioned it. They called relatives, sent out announcements. I chose a business program at the University of Washington. It was a great school, an excellent reputation, known for its innovative business school. I was thrilled, but Leo couldn't help but snicker. "Business, huh?" he'd said at the dinner table, his fork hovering over his mashed potatoes, a smirk playing on his lips. I guess not everyone can handle the rigor of a real STEM program. Dad would clear his throat. Leo, be nice to your sister. But it was said with no real conviction, a mere formality. Then almost immediately, he'd turn to Leo, his eyes alight with genuine interest. So, son, tell me about your latest coding project. What are you working on now? Effectively every time, he validated the hierarchy Leo had established, reinforcing the idea that Leo's world of pure tech was the true intellectual arena, and mine was just business. The only person who ever truly saw me, who truly understood the quiet fire simmering beneath my polite exterior, was my grandmother, Nana Rose. She was a surprise in our family. At 78, she had an iPad, a smartphone, and was more tech-savvy than both my parents combined. Nana Rose had been a mathematics professor in the 1970s, a time when women in her field were as rare as unicorns. She recognized something in me that others missed, a different kind of intelligence, a different kind of strength. They don't see it yet, she told me once during my sophomore year of college, when I was home for Christmas break, feeling particularly overshadowed after Leo had spent dinner talking about his internship at Google. He had described it in such detail, using terms only he understood, painting a picture of a rarefied world of genius that I, in my mere business program, could never enter. I'd retreated to Nana's small study, feeling small and insignificant. She had poured me a cup of herbal tea, her hands gnarled but steady. But you have something just as valuable as technical knowledge, Clara, she had said, her eyes kind but sharp. You understand people and systems. You see the big picture. That matters in technology too, maybe even more. Her words were a balm, a revelation. She didn't tell me to try harder at coding or to be more like Leo. She told me to embrace who I was. With her encouragement, I focused on my strengths. I devoured books on organizational psychology, leadership, and market dynamics. I participated in case competitions, where I learned to analyze complex business problems and present solutions. I graduated with honors, landing a job in marketing at a small tech firm called Nexus Solutions. My degree was in business, yes, but my focus had been on the technology sector, on how products were brought to market, how companies grew. Leo, predictably, was unimpressed. Marketing for a tech company, he'd sneered at my graduation dinner, swirling wine in his glass with an air of superior judgment. So you'll be making pretty brochures for products you don't understand. I swallowed my anger, a bitter pill, but deep down, I made a silent promise to myself. I'd prove him wrong. I'd prove them all wrong. I worked twice as hard as anyone else at Nexus Solutions. It wasn't enough to just learn the marketing side, the glossy presentations, and catchy slogans. I dove into our products, understanding them deeply enough to explain their value, their technical specifications, their why to clients who knew nothing about the underlying code. I shadowed engineers, asked endless questions, trying to bridge the gap between their complex creations and the real-world problems they solved. I took night classes in basic programming, not to become a developer. I knew that wasn't my true calling, but to speak the language of our technical teams, to truly understand their challenges and their triumphs. It was about respect, about effective communication, about building bridges. Within 3 years, I'd moved up to marketing director. 2 years after that, I was recruited by Horizon Innovations, a major player in enterprise software, a company known for its cutting-edge solutions and global reach. Each step forward in my career was met with the same dismissive attitude from Leo. When I excitedly told my family about my new job at Horizon Innovations, a prestigious leap that I had worked tirelessly for, Leo interrupted with news about his own startup idea, a vague concept he called ByteForge. His voice boomed, drowning out my quiet announcement. My promotion to team lead coincided with his first round of seed funding, an event he celebrated with a lavish party that eclipsed any small gathering for my career milestone. When I was made department head, overseeing a team of 20, he casually announced he'd been featured in a prominent tech blog, Tech Innovators Weekly. Family gatherings became increasingly tense, increasingly unbearable, as Leo dominated conversations with technical jargon, positioning himself as the only person at the table who truly understood the modern world, the future. He'd use terms like neural networks and blockchain architecture without explanation, effectively shutting down any meaningful contribution from others. He wasn't sharing knowledge. He was asserting intellectual dominance. "Don't worry if you don't get it," he'd say, especially to me, his voice oozing condescension. "It's pretty complex stuff." My parents would beam with pride, their faces illuminated by his reflected glory, while I sat quietly, building my career without fanfare, without the loud pronouncements and self-congratulatory back-patting. Nana Rose, however, would always catch my eye across the table. She'd give me a knowing wink, a subtle nod. "Patience," her looks seemed to say. "Your time will come." And it did, in a way I never, ever could have anticipated. 7 years into my career at Horizon Innovations, I was appointed Director of Strategic Acquisitions. It was a role I had worked relentlessly for, a position that combined my deep business acumen with the hard-earned technical knowledge I'd cultivated over the years. My team was responsible for identifying promising smaller companies for potential purchase, companies that could either complement Horizon Innovations' offerings, integrate into our existing platforms, or sometimes eliminate future competition. It was during a routine review of acquisition targets, a stack of preliminary reports on my desk, that a familiar, stomach-churning name appeared. My career trajectory at Horizon Innovations hadn't been accidental. While Leo was busy talking about his achievements, I was quietly building mine, brick by painstaking brick. I started in marketing, yes, but quickly demonstrated an aptitude for understanding market trends, identifying emerging opportunities, and, crucially, translating complex technical concepts into actionable business strategies. My ability to bridge the gap between technical teams and business objectives made me invaluable, a rare commodity in the corporate world. My talent for strategic thinking, for seeing the forest and the trees, moved me up the corporate ladder faster than even I had expected. After 8 years, I found myself in this position, Director of Strategic Acquisitions, leading a team of experts, advising the C-suite, making decisions that impacted the company's future. We analyzed dozens of potential acquisitions each quarter, meticulously scrutinizing their financials, their intellectual property, their leadership teams, their market fit. We looked not just at current value, but at future potential, at how a smaller entity could slot into our vast ecosystem and amplify our growth. It was during one of our regular scouting sessions, sifting through a pile of digital reports, that the name ByteForge appeared on our radar. "This one has potential," my assistant Parker noted, sliding the preliminary report across my desk. Parker was sharp, efficient, and had a dry wit that perfectly matched mine. Small team, great tech, burning through cash too quickly, classic acquisition target. I opened the file. The ByteForge logo, a sleek, stylized bee, was familiar from Leo's social media posts. My breath hitched. My hands, resting on the keyboard, froze. Then I saw it. The founder's name, Leo Vance. My brother's company was on our acquisition list, and he had absolutely no idea. My first instinct, my immediate, gut-wrenching professional reflex, was to recuse myself. Immediately, there was a clear, undeniable conflict of interest, and I prided myself on my professional ethics, on being unimpeachable in my conduct. I was about to pass the file to my colleague Mark, when curiosity, that irresistible, dangerous serpent, got the better of me. What exactly had my brother built? How was his company really performing? For once, I had the opportunity to see beyond Leo's carefully curated narrative, beyond the endless stream of self-aggrandizing LinkedIn posts and family dinner monologues. What I found surprised me. The technology was genuinely innovative. Leo had always been brilliant, no doubt about it, a true wizard with code. ByteForge had developed an innovative approach to machine learning that could potentially enhance our flagship product, giving us a significant competitive edge. They had strong intellectual property, talented engineers, and a vision that was genuinely ahead of its time. But the business was in trouble, deep existential trouble. ByteForge had burned through 2 rounds of funding, millions of dollars, with minimal revenue to show for it. Their customer acquisition costs were unsustainable, a gaping maw that swallowed investor money. Their marketing strategy was inconsistent, fragmented, a series of shiny but ineffective campaigns. They had no clear path to profitability, no scalable revenue model, the very aspects of business that Leo had dismissed as trivial, as less than, compared to pure technical development, marketing, sales, financial planning, strategic partnerships. Those were the exact areas where his company was failing catastrophically. The irony was almost too much to bear. I arranged a meeting with our Chief Strategy Officer, Sarah Jenkins, a formidable woman with a reputation for sharp analysis and unwavering integrity. "I need to disclose a potential conflict," I said as soon as we sat down in her minimalist, glass-walled office. "Byteforge, the startup on our acquisition list, its founder is my brother." Sarah raised an eyebrow, a slight, knowing curve. "I didn't realize your brother was in tech." I laughed, a short, humorless burst that surprised even myself. "Oh, he's made sure everyone knows he's in tech. He just doesn't advertise that his sister works for a corporate sellout like Horizon Innovations." We discussed the ethical considerations at length. Sarah was meticulous. We talked about appearances, about potential accusations of favoritism, or worse, sabotage. Ultimately, we decided that I would recuse myself from direct negotiations, stepping back from the front lines of the deal. However, my knowledge of both the technology sector and, yes, my brother's work, however flawed his business execution, could be incredibly valuable in an advisory capacity. "Just keep everything by the book, Clara," Sarah advised, her voice firm. "Document all communications. We'll make sure there's no appearance of either favoritism or sabotage. The acquisition makes sense for Horizon Innovations regardless of your personal connection. The IP is solid." For the next 3 months, I watched from the periphery as our acquisition team conducted due diligence on Byteforge. Their findings confirmed my initial assessment. Every grim detail, brilliant technology hampered by catastrophically poor business execution. To my surprise, and perhaps to my own confusion, I found myself advocating for the acquisition despite my complicated, lifelong feelings about Leo. The technology was worth saving. The team, the brilliant, overworked engineers who had poured their lives into Byteforge, except perhaps its founder, deserved a chance to succeed, to see their innovations brought to fruition with proper support and resources. What struck me most during the entire process was Leo's complete and utter unawareness of my role at Horizon Innovations. In the few family gatherings that occurred during this period, a casual Sunday brunch, a cousin's birthday, he continued to talk down to me about tech, to offer his unsolicited, superior opinions on my supposed career path, while I sat silently, knowing more about his company's precarious financial state than he realized I could possibly understand. It was an odd, almost surreal power dynamic, a silent counterpoint to his loud pronouncements. The knowledge was a heavy weight, but also, in a strange way, a kind of quiet power. The acquisition was finalized 1 week before Easter. Byteforge would become a subsidiary of Horizon Innovations, its groundbreaking machine learning technology integrated into our main platform. Leo, the self-proclaimed visionary, the tech genius, would stay on as a technical advisor for 1 year. The ultimate delicious irony? He would be reporting to a manager who, in turn, reported to me. The financial terms were generous, more generous than the company's performance warranted, but we were paying for the intellectual property and the talented engineering team, not the current abysmal revenue figures. It was a strategic investment, not a rescue mission, at least not officially. As Easter approached, I found myself increasingly anxious about the inevitable family gathering. Should I tell my family about my involvement before the dinner? Should I warn Leo? My stomach nodded every time the thought crossed my mind. I called Nana Rose for advice, as I always did when facing a moral quandary or a personal Everest. "You've done nothing wrong, Clara," she said firmly, her voice clear and steady over the phone. "You've built a career you should be proud of, and you've conducted yourself ethically throughout this process. If Leo has misrepresented his success or underestimated yours, that's for him to reconcile. It's his burden, not yours." "But it's going to be so awkward," I groaned, picturing the explosion that would inevitably follow. "Perhaps," Nana replied, and I could hear the smile in her voice, that mischievous glint that always accompanied her deepest wisdom. "But sometimes, my dear, a little awkwardness is necessary for growth. Come to dinner, be yourself, and let the truth find its way to the table." So that's what I decided to do. I would attend Easter dinner without preemptively revealing my role in the acquisition. I wouldn't lie if asked directly, but I wouldn't volunteer information either. Let Leo tell his version first, I thought. After all these years of living in his shadow, I was curious, morbidly, deliciously curious, to see how he would present his company's successful exit. Easter Sunday arrived with deceptive tranquility. The April sky was a clear, impossible blue. a vast, hopeful canvas. White blossoms dotted the trees in my parents' yard, fragrant and delicate, and the air carried that distinctive spring freshness, a promise of renewal. I pulled up to my childhood home, a sturdy brick house nestled on a quiet, tree-lined street in the Seattle suburbs, with David, my boyfriend of 2 years, beside me. David squeezed my hand reassuringly. He'd witnessed enough family gatherings to understand the dynamic, to know the particular flavor of Leo's condescension, and he'd been my patient, steadfast sounding board throughout the entire acquisition process. As a high school history teacher, he was refreshingly removed from the tech world, which made him a perfect neutral party, an objective observer. "Remember," he said, echoing Nana Rose's words, "you've done nothing wrong, and I'm here for moral support. Just focus on Mom's amazing scalloped potatoes." "I know," I sighed, a tight knot forming in my chest. "I just hate confrontation. It makes my teeth ache." "Sometimes it finds you anyway," he replied sagely, his eyes twinkling. "Like an unwanted relative." Mom greeted us at the door with her customary enthusiasm, a whirlwind of floral apron and warm hugs. "Clara, David, so good to see you. Everyone's already here. We're just waiting on Aunt Carol and Uncle Ben." By everyone, she meant Leo and his wife, Emily, had already arrived, along with Nana Rose and my father's brother, Uncle Mark, with his family. I steeled myself, took a deep breath, and stepped into the familiar, slightly chaotic energy of our family living room. Just as I suspected, Leo was holding court by the fireplace, gesturing animatedly, his voice booming with self-importance. Emily, kind and unpretentious, a pediatric nurse who seemed to balance Leo's sprawling ego with her own groundedness, smiled politely beside him, occasionally nodding along. Dad and Uncle Mark were nodding vigorously, their faces impressed by whatever grand pronouncement as Leo was delivering. Emily spotted me first, her face lighting up. She waved, a genuine warmth in her expression. Despite everything, I'd always liked Emily. She was good, solid. "Clara," she exclaimed, coming over to hug me, pulling me into a tight embrace. "It's been too long. How have you been?" Leo turned, his storytelling interrupted. "Oh, hey, Claire's. David." He nodded curtly at my boyfriend, a quick, dismissive gesture that spoke volumes, before immediately pivoting back to his captive audience by the fireplace. Anyway, as I was saying, the exit strategy worked perfectly. You have to know when to cash in your chips in this industry. It's all about timing. My stomach tightened, a cold, hard knot. Exit strategy. Leo was already spinning the acquisition as if it had been his master plan all along. A brilliant move on his chessboard, rather than a necessary lifeline for a sinking company. He was rewriting history in real time, sculpting his narrative. "Tech is so volatile right now," he continued, pacing slightly, enjoying the spotlight. "But if you know what you're doing, if you have the vision, you can position yourself for maximum leverage. That's what I did. Pure genius, really." Dad beamed proudly, his face practically glowing. "Leo was just telling us about his company's acquisition. Sounds like he made quite a deal, son. Is that right?" "Congratulations, Leo," I said, keeping my voice neutral, deceptively calm. "That's wonderful news." He shrugged with affected modesty, a theatrical gesture. "Just how the game is played, Dad. Not everyone understands the long-term strategy involved. It's about foresight, about anticipating market shifts, about pure, unadulterated innovation." "Clara works in tech too, Leo," David interjected, ever helpful, ever the champion. Leo laughed, a short, sharp bark of amusement. "Yeah, marketing for some corporate giant, right, Claire's? Not quite the same as founding and exiting a startup. That's where the real grit is, the real risk." Before I could respond, or perhaps before I could unleash the torrent of information that was bubbling at the surface, Mom called from the kitchen. "Clara, darling, could you help me with the deviled eggs? They're being stubborn." "Mom?" Grateful for the escape, for a momentary reprieve from Leo's self-serving narrative, I slipped away to the kitchen, where Nana Rose was already arranging a colorful platter of appetizers. She looked up as I entered, her eyes twinkling, a conspiratorial glint in them. "Just in time, my dear," she said, handing me a serving spoon. "Your mother needs help, and I need entertainment. How's our tech mogul spinning his tail out there?" "Nana," I whispered, glancing toward the door, my voice laced with exasperation. "He's acting like he orchestrated the whole thing as some brilliant strategy. He's completely rewriting the script. She chuckled softly, a warm, resonant sound. Men like your brother often rewrite history to protect their egos, Clara. It's a classic play. The question is, what are you going to do about it? I busied myself with the deviled eggs, scooping creamy yolk mixture back into the whites with meticulous precision. Nothing, I guess, I mumbled, feeling the familiar resignation settle over me. What can I do? Stand up and announce that his company was 3 months from bankruptcy and my company saved it? Humiliate him in front of the whole family? You could, she said calmly, her voice even. Or you could simply tell the truth, if asked directly. Not to humiliate him, no. But because truth matters, especially in families. Because peace built on falsehood isn't really peace, Clara. It's suppression. She placed a warm, papery hand over mine, her touch grounding. You've spent your whole life diminishing your light so Leo could shine brighter. Maybe it's time to stop doing that. Mom bustled in before I could respond, a flurry of activity, assigning us more food preparation tasks. The next hour passed in a blur of clinking dishes, muffled laughter, and the chaotic energy of a large family gathering. Through it all, I could hear Leo's voice rising above the others, a constant, insistent drone, continuing to shape his narrative of entrepreneurial brilliance, of visionary leadership. He was a master of his own PR. As I helped Nana Rose set the dining room table, arranging the polished silverware and delicate crystal glasses, she murmured softly, her words just for me, a quiet current beneath the surface noise. Stand tall, Clara, but don't force it. The truth has a way of finding its moment. Finally, Mom announced dinner was ready. We all gathered around the large, gleaming oak table, a sprawling affair that groaned under the weight of traditional favorites: honey-glazed ham, creamy scalloped potatoes, bright green bean casserole, and Mom's famous yeast rolls that took hours to prepare. Crystal glasses that only appeared for special occasions caught the light from the dining room chandelier, casting dancing prisms across the white linen tablecloth, and the good china, a wedding gift from my grandparents, was arranged in perfect place settings. Leo strategically positioned himself at the center of the table, directly across from Dad, the perfect spot for commanding attention. David and I sat near one end, with Nana Rose comfortably settled beside me, her presence a calming, knowing anchor. As we settled in for the meal, I felt the tension in my shoulders building, a physical manifestation of the mental warfare I'd been waging. Leo had spent the past hour misleading our family about his professional situation while dismissing mine. Yet here I sat, silently complicit in his deception, a co-conspirator in the grand performance. Nana Rose was right. This wasn't peace. This was an uneasy truce, a suppression of my own reality. And as the dinner conversation inevitably, predictably, turned toward careers and accomplishments, I knew the moment of truth was rapidly approaching. It was an inevitability, like the spring thaw after a long winter. Aunt Carol raised her glass, her voice bright and cheerful. Before we start, I think we should toast to family, to spring, and to new beginnings. And to success, Leo added quickly, raising his own glass higher, interrupting, always interrupting. To new ventures and knowing when to cash out. He took a dramatic sip. Everyone dutifully lifted their glasses, though I noticed Emily's smile seemed strained, a little too fixed. Nana Rose's eyes met mine briefly, a silent exchange of understanding, before we all took a sip and began passing dishes around the table. The conversation flowed easily at first, meandering through safe topics like Cousin Amy's new baby, Uncle Ben's recent retirement, and Aunt Carol's planned trip to Italy. But as the meal progressed, Leo grew increasingly restless, his attention span for topics that didn't allow him to showcase his achievements remarkably short. When there was a brief lull in conversation, a momentary silence as people chewed and considered second helpings, he seized the opportunity, his voice cutting through the gentle hum. So, Dad, he began, cutting into his ham with a flourish, his knife scraping against the china plate. I've been thinking about advising you on your retirement portfolio. After this acquisition, I've got some insights into where tech is headed that could really maximize your returns. We're talking exponential growth here. Dad looked impressed, his eyes widening with genuine interest. That would be great, son. I could certainly use the help. The market's been a bit of a mystery to me lately. What about you, Clara? Aunt Carol asked kindly, turning to me. Her question felt like a refreshing breeze, an unexpected acknowledgement. How's work going for you? Still at the same company? Before I could answer, before I could even formulate a polite, non-committal response, Leo jumped in, seizing control of the narrative once more. Clara's still doing marketing at that big corporate place. What is it again? Synergy Soft? Horizon Innovations, I corrected quietly, my voice a soft murmur, barely audible over the clinking of silverware. Right, Leo continued dismissively, waving a hand in the air as if swatting away a fly. Anyway, as I was telling Dad, the real action is in startups. That's where the innovation is, the disruption. Corporate tech is where innovation goes to die. It's like a graveyard for original thought. I took a slow, deep breath, willing myself to stay calm, to not let the red haze of anger cloud my judgment. My hands resting on my lap clenched into tight fists. Actually, that's not the problem with corporate environments, Leo interrupted, warming to his topic, his voice rising, gaining momentum, is that they're full of people who couldn't cut it as entrepreneurs. They're risk-averse, bogged down in bureaucracy. They want stability, not true growth. No offense, Clars, he added, flashing a patronizing smile that made it clear offense was absolutely, unequivocally intended. The smile was a shield, a weapon. Mom tried to redirect, sensing the rising tension. Clara has been promoted several times, Leo. She's doing very well. She manages a large team. Sure, Leo nodded condescendingly, his smile widening, his eyes bright with self-satisfaction. I'm sure she's great at whatever marketing stuff she does. She probably makes a mean PowerPoint. But let's be real, Mom. It's not the same as being in the trenches, building something from nothing, taking real risks, betting your house on an idea. He actually puffed out his chest a little, as if he'd just single-handedly conquered Everest. The table had grown uncomfortably quiet. Even David, normally diplomatic to a fault, a master of deflecting conversational landmines, was gripping his fork with unnecessary force, his knuckles white. I focused on cutting my ham into perfectly even pieces, a small, futile act of control, willing myself to stay calm, to not rise to the bait. The silence amplified Leo's voice, made his words feel heavier, more pointed. Leo, oblivious to the palpable tension, or perhaps feeding on it, thriving in it, continued his monologue, his voice dripping with condescension. The tech industry separates the visionaries from the support staff pretty quickly. Some people have what it takes to innovate, to disrupt, to lead technological revolutions. Others are better suited to, well, supporting roles. He looked directly at me then, his gaze unwavering, a challenge in his eyes. He paused for dramatic effect, letting his words hang in the air, a silent judgment. Not everyone can handle a real career in tech. The silence that followed was deafening. It wasn't just uncomfortable. It was thick, heavy, suffocating. Mom looked mortified, her hand fluttering nervously to her throat. Dad's face was a mask of discomfort, his gaze fixed somewhere beyond Leo's shoulder. Emily was staring intently at her plate, her usually kind face a study in strained neutrality. I felt David's hand find mine under the table, squeezing supportively, a silent affirmation that I wasn't alone. And then, from the other end of the table, came Nana Rose's clear, steady voice, cutting through the silence like a perfectly aimed laser. Is that why your company just bought his? Time seemed to stop. All eyes, every single pair, swiveled from Nana Rose to me, then back to Leo, whose fork, laden with ham and potatoes, clattered against his plate, echoing loudly in the sudden stillness. His face, usually so composed, so smug, cycled rapidly through confusion, then disbelief, then dawning, horrified realization. He looked like a deer caught in headlights. What? He sputtered, his voice cracking, looking frantically between Nana Rose and me, as if searching for a hidden camera, a prank that had gone horribly wrong. What are you talking about, Nana? That's ridiculous. Nana Rose took a calm sip of her water, her gaze unwavering, radiating an almost intimidating serenity. I'm simply asking if that's why Clara's company, Horizon Innovations, acquired your startup, ByteForge, because they're the real tech innovators. Because you needed a lifeline. The table erupted in confused murmurs, a cacophony of bewildered questions. Dad's brow furrowed. Clara's company bought Leo's? What does that mean? What are you talking about, Nana? Leo's face had flushed a deep, alarming red, his composure completely shattered. That's not what happened, he stammered, scrambling for words for control. We were acquired, yes, but it was a strategic exit. A brilliant, pre-planned move. I chose to sell, and Clara had nothing to do with it. She works in marketing, for God's sake. She wouldn't understand this level of deal-making. All eyes turned to me. For a moment, just a fleeting, agonizing moment, I considered letting it go, finding some diplomatic way to preserve Leo's rapidly disintegrating dignity, to smooth over the explosive revelation. But then I remembered Nana's words about truth and families, about peace built on falsehood, and all the years I'd spent dimming my light, shrinking myself, making myself smaller so Leo could shine brighter, so he wouldn't feel threatened. A quiet fury, long suppressed, began to stir within me, a slow, burning ember that suddenly flared into a determined flame. Actually, I said, my voice steadier, calmer than I expected, a quiet force against the chaos. Every syllable felt like a stone dropping into a still pond, sending ripples across the table. I'm the Director of Strategic Acquisitions at Horizon Innovations. I've been in that role for almost 2 years now. Leo stared at me, his mouth agape, his eyes wide with a disbelief so profound it bordered on agony. That's impossible! You would have said something. You would have mentioned that. Would I asked quietly, my gaze meeting his, holding it. A lifetime of unspoken resentments, of swallowed slights, poured into that simple question. When would I have mentioned it, Leo? Between your lectures on blockchain, or your condescending explanations of why marketing isn't real tech work, or when you were detailing your next great visionary idea? You never once asked me about my career. Not once. You never seemed interested. Wait, Dad interjected, looking utterly confused, his head swiveling between us, trying to piece together the fractured narrative. You're saying you were involved in buying Leo's company? His company? She's lying, Leo snapped, his voice suddenly sharp, regaining some of its defensive edge. She's trying to take credit for my exit. If she worked in acquisitions, I would have known. My team dealt with Horizon Innovations executives directly. She's making this up. Your team dealt with my team, Leo, I corrected him, my voice remaining level despite the tremor in my hands. I recused myself from direct negotiations because of our relationship, because of the obvious conflict of interest. But yes, I was involved in an advisory capacity, and I'm the one who initially identified ByteForge as an acquisition target. I saw the potential, the technical potential. The stunned silence that followed was broken by Emily's soft voice, hesitant, almost a whisper. She looked at Leo, then at me, her face pale. It's true, Leo. I saw Clara's name on some of the preliminary paperwork. I assumed you knew, and just weren't mentioning it. I thought it was a family secret, something you'd worked out. Leo looked at Emily, his face a mask of profound betrayal. You knew? And you didn't tell me? I thought you knew, Leo, Emily protested, her voice rising slightly, exasperated. Why wouldn't you know? She's your sister. Because she's lying, Leo pushed back violently from the table, his chair scraping loudly against the polished hardwood floor, sending a jarring sound through the suddenly quiet room. He stood towering over us, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. His face was a thundercloud. This is sabotage. You deliberately targeted my company, didn't you, Clara? You couldn't stand that I was finally succeeding, that I was the one making waves, so you had to take over and ruin it. This is your petty revenge. Your company was 3 months from bankruptcy, Leo, I said, my voice still level, though my heart was pounding a furious drumbeat against my ribs. I looked at him, truly looked at the desperate, cornered animal in his eyes. You had great technology, brilliant engineers, but no sustainable business model. The acquisition saved your company, your employees' jobs, and your reputation. It was a business decision, a rescue. How dare you? Leo was nearly shouting now, his voice cracking with fury and humiliation. You know nothing about tech business. You know nothing about what it takes to build a startup from the ground up. You just make pretty brochures. Leo, Mom interjected, her voice sharp with alarm. Please calm down, you're upsetting everyone. I will not calm down, he snapped, turning his furious gaze on her. My sister has been undermining me my entire life, stealing my thunder, trying to prove she's something she's not. And now she's claiming she saved my company? That's rich. That's absolutely rich. I looked around the table at the shocked, bewildered faces of my family. The illusion, the carefully constructed facade of Leo's undisputed brilliance, had shattered. I'm not claiming I saved anything, Leo, I said, my voice firm, resolute. I'm just telling the truth about what I do and what happened. Byteforge had valuable IP and talented engineers. That's why we acquired it. It was a business decision, not a personal one. We saw value. We saw potential. Leo laughed bitterly, a harsh, humorless sound. Right, just business. Is that why you never mentioned your role? Because it was so impersonal? I never mentioned my role because you never asked, I said simply, the raw honesty of my statement hanging in the air, heavy with years of unspoken truth. You've never been interested in my career, Leo. You've been too busy explaining to everyone why what you do is so much more important, so much more real. Leo opened his mouth to argue, a torrent of furious words clearly on the tip of his tongue, then closed it again. The air seemed to have been sucked out of him. Without another word, without even a glance back, he turned and stormed out of the dining room. A moment later, the front door slammed, reverberating through the suddenly silent house. The table remained silent for several long seconds, the clattering of silverware, the hum of conversation, all replaced by a heavy, profound stillness. Finally, Uncle Ben cleared his throat, a small, tentative sound in the quiet. Well, he managed, his voice a little shaky. That was unexpected. Aunt Carol turned to me, her face creased with genuine surprise, a hint of shame in her eyes. Clara, honey, I had no idea you were so high up in your company, Director of Strategic Acquisitions. That sounds incredibly important. Why haven't you ever told us? Why did you keep it so quiet? I looked around at my family, truly looked at them. At the genuine surprise, the nascent interest, the dawning understanding on their faces. And in that moment, a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying, a burden of years of quiet suppression and polite invisibility, began to lift. It was like a tight knot in my chest, a physical constriction slowly, painfully starting to untangle. I guess no one ever really asked, I said softly, the words escaping almost before I consciously formed them. The truth, finally spoken, felt both terrifying and liberating. As the shock of Leo's departure settled over the table, slowly, surely, all eyes turned to me. The family dynamic had shifted so suddenly, so ethnically, that no one seemed to know quite how to proceed. Emily looked particularly uncomfortable, caught between loyalty to her husband and the undeniable, uncomfortable truth that had just been revealed. Perhaps, Nana Rose suggested gently, her voice a quiet, authoritative balm, this would be a good time for Clara to tell us about her actual career, in detail, from the beginning. Mom nodded eagerly, though her eyes kept darting nervously to the front door where Leo had exited. Yes, please, sweetheart. I feel terrible that we don't know more about what you do. We've been so distracted. Please tell us everything. I took a deep breath, feeling strangely vulnerable, exposed, but also surprisingly ready. For years, I'd protected myself by keeping my professional life separate from my family, a walled garden of quiet achievements, partly because of Leo's dismissive attitude, partly because I'd grown accustomed to being overlooked, and partly, perhaps, because it was easier than constantly trying to prove myself. Now the wall had crumbled. I started at Horizon Innovations in Marketing, that's true, I began, my voice gaining confidence with each word, finding its rhythm. I looked at their faces, at their sudden, genuine interest. But I quickly demonstrated an aptitude for product strategy, understanding how technology fits into the market landscape. So after 2 years, I moved into that. Then I transitioned to business development, identifying partnerships and new growth avenues. And finally, almost 2 years ago, I became Director of Strategic Acquisitions. I paused, letting the words sink in. I've been with the company for 9 years now. 9 years? Dad looked genuinely surprised, his brow furrowing as he did the math. That's impressive in tech, isn't it? Such a volatile industry. David nodded, a proud smile on his face. Extremely impressive. Clara manages a team of 15 people, and she reports directly to the C-suite. She's one of the youngest directors in the company. A small, genuine smile tugged at my lips as I glanced at my supportive boyfriend. His pride was infectious. It's a good position, I said. I enjoy the work, it's challenging, but it's fulfilling. But what exactly do you do? Aunt Carol asked, seeming genuinely interested, her previous obliviousness replaced by a clear desire to understand. So I told them. I explained how my team identified promising companies with valuable technology or a strategic market position. how we evaluated their potential fit with Horizon Innovations, assessing not just financials, but cultural alignment, intellectual property, and talent. I described how we structured deals that benefited both parties, creating win-win scenarios. I walked them through the due diligence process, the rigorous examination of a target company's finances, legal standing, and technical assets, the complex negotiation strategies, the delicate dance of valuation and terms, and the integration challenges that followed acquisitions, the painstaking work of merging teams and technologies. "That sounds incredibly complex," Uncle Ben commented, shaking his head slowly, a newfound respect in his eyes. I had no idea. "It sounds like you're practically running a whole other company." "And Byteforge?" Dad asked cautiously, his voice softer now, tinged with a delicate balance of curiosity and lingering discomfort. "How did that come about, Clara?" I explained the process as factually as possible, emphasizing the professional aspects and downplaying any personal elements, any hint of the sibling rivalry that had defined our lives. "The technology was genuinely innovative," I said, wanting to be fair to Leo, despite everything. "Our technical team was very impressed with what they'd built. It was cutting edge, but the business fundamentals weren't strong enough to sustain the company independently. They were struggling significantly with monetization and market penetration." "So you saved them," Aunt Carol concluded, her voice laced with admiration. "We made a business decision that benefited both companies," I corrected gently. "Horizon Innovations got valuable intellectual property and a talented engineering team. Byteforge's investors got a better return than they would have otherwise, especially given their financial state. And their employees got job security. It was a strategic acquisition for us, and a lifeline for them." "And Leo?" Mom asked quietly, her gaze searching. "Leo received fair compensation for his work," I explained, "and he has a 1-year contract as a technical advisor within Horizon Innovations. After that, he can stay on if both parties agree it's working out." Emily, who had been quiet until now, her gaze fixed on the table, suddenly spoke up, her voice a little shaky but resolute. "The acquisition saved us financially," she admitted, looking up, her eyes glistening. "Leo wouldn't want me to say this, he's too proud, but we were in real trouble. He'd put everything into the company, our savings, a second mortgage on our house. We were 3 missed payrolls away from losing everything. It was a disaster waiting to happen." Her honesty surprised me, truly surprised me. Leo had always presented their life as one of startup glamour, of imminent success, of a financial breakthrough just around the corner. I'd had no idea they were so incredibly vulnerable. The weight of that revelation, the depth of Leo's desperation, settled over me. "I didn't know it was that serious," I said softly, genuinely shaken. Emily nodded, a tear tracking a path down her cheek. "He's proud. He wouldn't admit how bad things had gotten. When Horizon Innovations' offer came through, it was like a miracle. But he couldn't see it that way. To him, it felt like failure, like a public defeat." Dad looked troubled, a deep frown etched into his face. "But why wouldn't he tell us? We could have helped. We would have helped." "For the same reason he couldn't admit Clara might be successful in tech," Nana Rose interjected wisely, her voice quiet but firm, cutting straight to the heart of the matter. "Pride, and a lifetime of believing he had to be the only star." The conversation paused as we all absorbed this. I felt a complex mix of emotions: vindication that my family finally understood my career, sadness for Leo's struggles and the incredible pressure he must have been under, and a lingering frustration that it had taken this kind of explosive confrontation for the truth to finally emerge. The bitterness was still there, but it was tinged with a strange empathy. "I should probably go talk to him," Emily said, pushing back from the table, her face etched with worry. "He'll be upset." "No," I said, making a sudden decision, a surprising surge of clarity washing over me. "I'll go." David squeezed my hand under the table, his eyes full of concern. "Are you sure, Claire's? He's pretty volatile right now." I nodded. "Yes, we need to clear the air, once and for all." As I pushed back from the table, Mom looked worried, her hand reaching out as if to physically stop me. "Clara, maybe give him some time to cool down first. He's probably just embarrassed." "We've given the situation years to cool down, Mom," I replied, my voice calm, resolute. "Decades, really. I think it's time for some honest conversation, for both of us." I found Leo sitting on the front porch steps, hunched over, staring out at the quiet suburban street, bathed in the soft, fading light of late afternoon. He didn't look up when I sat down beside him, leaving a careful, deliberate distance between us. The air between us was thick, heavy with unspoken words, with years of resentment and misunderstanding. "Come to gloat?" he asked flatly, his voice devoid of its usual booming confidence, reduced to a hollow rasp. He didn't even turn his head. "No," I said, my voice soft but firm. "I came to talk. Actually talk for once." He gave a humorless laugh, a short, bitter sound. "What's there to talk about, Clara? You won. Congratulations. You took my company. What more do you want?" "This isn't about winning or losing, Leo," I said, choosing my words carefully, trying to bridge the chasm between us. "It's about truth. And the truth is, I've spent my entire career being dismissed by you, watching you convince our family, and maybe even yourself, that what I do doesn't matter, because it's not real tech work, because it's not building something from nothing, because I'm not a genius. So I just stopped trying to correct you." He was quiet for a moment, then spoke, his voice low and laced with accusation. "So this was revenge, wasn't it? Getting your corporate giant to swallow mine? To humiliate me?" I sighed in frustration, rubbing my temples. "Do you really believe that, Leo? Do you honestly think I would risk my professional reputation, my entire career, and potentially violate corporate ethics, just to get back at you? Do you think I'm that petty? Or that stupid?" He was silent for another long moment, the only sound the chirping of crickets beginning their evening song. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost its defensive edge. It was quieter, almost vulnerable. "When did you become director of acquisitions?" 2 years ago, I answered simply, honestly. "And you never thought to mention it at family gatherings?" he pressed, a hint of genuine confusion in his voice. "When would I have mentioned it, Leo?" I asked, the question laced with a lifetime of exasperation. "Between your monologues about neural networks and blockchain? Or your explanations of why marketing isn't real tech work? You've never once asked me about my career, Leo. Not once. Not a single genuine question." He had the grace to look slightly abashed, his gaze dropping to his hands, clasped loosely between his knees. "I just assumed." "You assumed I was still in the same entry-level marketing position I started in 9 years ago," I finished for him, the words sharp but true. "Because that fit your narrative, that I wasn't capable of understanding real tech. Meanwhile, I've been steadily advancing, managing larger teams, taking on more responsibility, and actually succeeding in the industry you claim I'm not cut out for." Leo was silent for several long moments, staring at his hands, his posture slumped. When he finally spoke, his voice was almost a whisper, raw and stripped of its usual bravado. "Byteforge was really failing, wasn't it?" The vulnerability in his question caught me off guard. It wasn't the arrogant Leo I knew. It was something else. Something I hadn't seen since we were very young children, before the competition had festered. "The technology was sound, Leo," I said carefully, choosing my words to be fair, to acknowledge his brilliance. "It was genuinely innovative, groundbreaking even. But yes, the business was in trouble, serious trouble." "I kept thinking the next round of funding would solve everything," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "That we just needed a little more runway, a little more time. But each milestone we set, we'd miss or barely hit. And then just set a new one, chase the next promise. It was a treadmill." He finally looked directly at me, and I was startled to see the raw pain, the exhaustion, the profound humiliation in his expression. It wasn't just about the company, it was about his entire identity. I didn't want to fail. I've built my entire identity around being the tech genius in the family. What am I if that's not true? The question hung between us, heavy with years of competition, misunderstanding, and unspoken expectations. I thought carefully before responding. This wasn't the moment for gloating, for further tearing him down. This was a fragile moment, a chance for something new. "You are a tech genius, Leo," I said, meeting his gaze, trying to convey absolute sincerity. "Your coding skills are incredible, truly. And the core technology at Byteforge is genuinely innovative, something few people could have built. That's not in question. You have a gift, but building a successful company requires more than just technical brilliance. It needs business acumen, market understanding, strategic planning, effective management, financial discipline. All the things you dismissed as unimportant compared to coding. He winced, the words hitting home. Things you're good at, he said. A faint glimmer of understanding in his eyes. Yes, I acknowledged. Things I'm good at. We could have been complementing each other's strengths all these years, collaborating, instead of you treating me like I was somehow less than you because I focused on the business side of tech. Because I wasn't coding, we could have been a formidable team. Leo ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar from our childhood, a habit he'd had when he was frustrated or deep in thought. It momentarily transported me back to simpler times, before the baggage of ego and competition had weighed us down. I've been an ass, haven't I? The blunt admission, the sudden, raw honesty startled a laugh out of me. A genuine, surprised laugh. Yes, Leo, you really have. A magnificent one, in fact. A ghost of a smile, faint and uncertain, crossed his face. Can I blame it on the stereotypical arrogance of programmers? You can try, I said, my smile widening. But I work with plenty of programmers who manage not to be condescending to their sisters, so it's probably just you. The smile faded, and Leo looked genuinely remorseful, his gaze steady on mine. I'm sorry, Clara, I really am. I don't think I realized how dismissive, how cruel I've been until I heard it played back to me today, like a bad script. It was the first genuine apology I could remember receiving from my brother in years, possibly decades. Thank you for saying that, I said softly, the words settling in my heart, a fragile seed of hope. So what happens now? He asked, looking out at the fading light, his voice quiet. With Byteforge, I mean, with me. That depends partly on you, I said honestly. The integration team at Horizon Innovations thinks your technology has real potential as part of our enterprise suite. The code is brilliant. You know it better than anyone. If you can put aside your pride, your ego, and work collaboratively as part of a larger team, there's a place for you. Working for my little sister's company, he said, but without the bitterness, without the sneer I might have expected earlier. There was just a touch of lingering self-pity, perhaps, but it was muted. Working with a company that values your technical expertise, I corrected. My division oversees acquisitions and strategic integration, but I wouldn't be your direct manager. That would be Marcus, the head of technical integration. And he's brilliant, Leo. You'd learn a lot from him about scaling, about corporate architecture, about managing large-scale projects. Leo was quiet for a moment, contemplating, his gaze distant. I need to think about it. It's a big shift. That's fair, I agreed, rising to my feet. But don't think too long. Tech moves quickly, as you know. The offer stands for now. We sat in silence for a few more minutes, watching a neighbor walking their dog across the street, the rhythm of their steps echoing faintly in the quiet evening. It wasn't a comfortable silence, not exactly, but it wasn't hostile either. It was a neutral space, a pause, progress of a sort. We should probably go back inside, I finally suggested, breaking the stillness. Mom's probably worried sick, and your food is getting cold. Leo nodded, pushing himself up. This is going to be awkward, isn't it? He said, a wry twist to his lips. Probably, I admitted, a small smile playing on mine. But maybe it's time we were honest with each other, and with the family, no more pretending. He took a deep breath, his shoulders squaring slightly. No more pretending, he agreed, offering me his hand, formally, almost stiffly. I bypassed the handshake. Instead, on an impulse I hadn't anticipated, I leaned in and gave him a quick, awkward hug. His body stiffened for a second, then relaxed slightly. Happy Easter, Leo? Happy Easter, Claire's, he replied. And for the first time in years, the nickname held affection rather than condescension. It was a tiny thing, just a word, but it spoke volumes. Walking back into the dining room with Leo felt like re-entering a different world, stepping onto a stage after a dramatic interlude. The conversation stopped abruptly, all eyes turning toward us with varying degrees of concern and curiosity. Emily looked particularly relieved to see her husband return, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. Everything okay? Mom asked cautiously, her voice still laced with worry. Leo and I exchanged a glance, a silent acknowledgement of the truce we'd brokered. We're working on it, I answered honestly, the ambiguity intentional. We returned to our seats, and an awkward silence descended on the table once more. Uncle Ben cleared his throat, trying to inject some normalcy. Should we, continue with dinner? These rolls are amazing, Evelyn. Yes, please, I said gratefully, reaching for the potatoes. Pass the potatoes. The meal resumed with forced normalcy, conversation carefully steered toward neutral topics like the weather or local sports. But there was an unspoken acknowledgement, a palpable shift in the air, that something fundamental had changed in our family dynamic. Leo was uncharacteristically quiet, contributing to the conversation only when directly addressed. I could almost see him processing everything, recalibrating his understanding of our relationship, of his place in the family narrative, of his own identity. He picked at his food, his usual boisterous energy subdued. As dessert was being served, Mom's traditional lemon meringue pie, impossibly tall and golden, Leo suddenly spoke up, his voice lacking its usual booming confidence, hesitant, almost fragile. I owe everyone an apology, Pa, he said, looking around the table, his gaze settling on me. Especially you, Clara. All eyes turned to him in surprise. Leo Vance didn't apologize. It simply wasn't in his repertoire. Apologies were for lesser mortals, for those who made mistakes, not for the infallible tech genius. I haven't been honest about my company's situation, he continued, his voice gaining a quiet, painful momentum. He didn't look at me as he confessed, but somewhere over my shoulder. The truth is, Byteforge was struggling badly. The acquisition by Horizon Innovations wasn't my brilliant exit strategy, my master plan. It was a lifeline, a desperate, necessary lifeline. I was lucky to get it. Emily reached over and squeezed his hand supportively, her face soft with pride for his courage, for his rare moment of vulnerability. And I've been less than supportive of Clara's career, he admitted, finally turning his gaze to me. His eyes were clear, no longer clouded by anger or defensiveness. Actually, that's an understatement. I've been dismissive and condescending, and I was completely wrong. She's achieved more in tech than I ever realized, more than I gave her credit for. And I should have been celebrating her success instead of diminishing it, instead of trying to diminish her. The raw honesty in his voice rendered me speechless. This was a side of Leo I hadn't seen since we were very young, before competition and ego had created an impenetrable wall between us. It was Leo stripped bare, vulnerable, contrite. Dad looked between us, clearly struggling to reconcile this new information with years of established family dynamics, with the narrative he had so readily accepted. Leo, son, we had no idea things were so difficult with your company. Why didn't you tell us? We would have helped. Leo shrugged, a gesture both defensive and vulnerable. Pride, I guess. I've always been the tech prodigy, the successful one. Admitting failure didn't fit that image. It didn't fit the story I told myself, or the story I told all of you. But sweetheart, Mom said gently, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Success isn't just about never failing. It's about how you handle challenges. It's about perseverance and humility. Besides, Nana Rose added with characteristic directness, her gaze sweeping across the table, her voice a quiet, firm judgment. It seems the real tech success story in this family has been quietly unfolding while we were all distracted by louder narratives. She smiled at me then, a profound, comforting smile, and I felt a rush of gratitude for her unwavering support, for her fierce belief in me. She had seen the truth all along. I think, Dad said slowly, his voice laced with genuine regret, that we owe Clara an apology too. He turned to me, his eyes full of remorse. We should have asked more questions about your career. We should have celebrated your achievements the way we celebrated Leo's. We just took his word for everything. I'm so sorry we didn't do that, Clara. We're very proud of you, sweetheart. We always have been. We just wish we'd known more about what you were accomplishing. The validation I'd unconsciously sought for years, the quiet craving for recognition from my parents, washed over me, both gratifying and slightly discomforting in its intense immediacy. It was a wave of warmth, of affirmation. Thank you, I managed, my voice thick with emotion. That means a lot, more than you know. So what happens now? Aunt Carol asked, breaking the tender moment, her practical nature reasserting itself. With the company, I mean. Leo looked to me, a tacit acknowledgement of my expertise. a quiet submission to my authority. It was such a reversal of our usual dynamic that it took me a moment to respond, to shift gears from personal vulnerability to professional explanation. ByteForge's technology will be integrated into Horizon Innovation's main platform, I explained, falling back into the familiar cadence of my work. The technical team has the option to join Horizon Innovations, including Leo, who has a 1-year contract as a technical advisor. His expertise is genuinely valuable. And will you, Leo? Uncle Ben asked him directly, leaning forward slightly. Stay on, I mean? Leo glanced at me, then at Emily, before answering, his posture still a little slumped, but his voice steadying. I'm considering it. It would mean accepting a different role than I'm used to, a different kind of challenge, but, he paused, seeming to choose his words carefully, to truly internalize the meaning. Maybe it's time I learned some new skills, the business side of things specifically. How to make innovation sustainable, how to build a lasting company, not just a brilliant piece of code. It was as close to an acknowledgement of my expertise, of my value, as I'd ever heard from him. I decided to meet him halfway, to offer a bridge. The tech industry works best when different types of expertise collaborate, I offered, looking at him, a genuine sense of hope blossoming in my chest. Technical brilliance and business acumen aren't mutually exclusive, Leo. They're complementary. Like brother and sister, Nana Rose suggested with a knowing smile, her eyes twinkling mischievously. Leo actually laughed, a real, unforced laugh, a sound I hadn't heard from him in years, a sound filled with a surprising warmth. Exactly like that, I suppose. Who knew? As the meal continued, the conversation began to flow more naturally, more authentically. For perhaps the first time in our adult lives, Leo and I engaged in a genuine dialogue, rather than parallel monologues or one-sided lectures. He asked questions about my role at Horizon Innovations with authentic interest, his technical mind curious about the strategic and financial complexities. And I inquired about the technical challenges he'd solved at ByteForge, genuinely fascinated by the core innovation he'd created. Our family watched this exchange with something like wonder, as if witnessing a rare natural phenomenon, a delicate balance finally achieved. After dessert, as we helped clear the table, Dad pulled me aside. His face was still etched with a lingering sadness, a deep regret. I had no idea, Clara, he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. About your job, about how successful you've become. Why didn't you tell us more? Why did you keep it a secret? I considered the question seriously, the answer complex, layered with years of unspoken history. I think after a while, Dad, I said, looking at him, seeing the pain in his eyes. I just got used to being in the background. Leo was always so forceful about his accomplishments, so loud, so dominant, that it seemed easier to stay quiet about mine. It felt like trying to shout into a hurricane. Dad looked genuinely distressed, a profound sense of paternal guilt weighing him down. We should have noticed. I should have noticed. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. It's okay, Dad, I reassured him, reaching out to squeeze his arm. We all fell into patterns, didn't we, for a long time, but maybe now we can create some new ones, different ones. Later, as we gathered in the living room for coffee, the rich aroma filling the air, Nana Rose orchestrated a moment that would have seemed utterly impossible just hours before. I think, she announced, her voice clear and strong, cutting through the low hum of conversation with the authority that only an elder matriarch can command, that we should have a proper toast to both these siblings and their remarkable achievements in technology. She raised her coffee cup, her eyes twinkling, a knowing smile playing on her lips. To Leo, whose technical brilliance created valuable innovation, and to Clara, whose business acumen ensures that innovation reaches its potential in the market, making it accessible, viable, and sustainable. May they both continue to succeed, perhaps even together. To Leo and Clara, the family echoed, raising their cups, their voices joining in a chorus of newfound understanding and respect. Leo caught my eye across the room. He met my gaze, and then, slowly, a simple, profound gesture, he raised his cup a little higher in my direction, a silent acknowledgement, a subtle nod. It was a small thing, but one that spoke volumes about the shift in our relationship, about the new foundation we were, tentatively, building. As the afternoon turned into evening and guests began to depart, the lingering scent of lemon pie and coffee filling the air, Leo approached me one more time. He stood awkwardly for a moment, then took a deep breath. I meant what I said earlier, he told me quietly, his voice still a little subdued, but sincere. I am truly sorry for how I've treated you, Clara, and for how I've dismissed your career. It was unfair, and it was wrong. I know, I said, looking at him, truly seeing him, not just the caricature I'd built up over years of resentment. And I appreciate that, Leo, more than you know. He hesitated, then added, almost shyly, I'm going to take the position at Horizon Innovations, the technical advisor role. I've got a lot to learn about the business side of tech, about scaling, about sustainability. And he smiled ruefully, a genuine, self-deprecating smile that was completely new to him. It seems I have access to a pretty good teacher. I couldn't help but smile back, a warmth spreading through my chest. Just promise not to call it not real tech work, and we'll be fine. Deal? Deal, he agreed, extending his hand formally, as if sealing a business agreement. I bypassed the handshake. Instead, I leaned in and gave him a quick, firm hug, a gesture of unexpected closeness, of forgiveness, of a hopeful future. Happy Easter, Leo. Happy Easter, Claire's, he replied. And for the first time in years, the nickname held genuine affection rather than a cutting condescension. It felt like a small, precious victory. As David and I drove home that evening, the city lights twinkling in the distance, I felt both utterly exhausted and strangely invigorated. Years of entrenched family dynamics, decades of unspoken resentments and carefully constructed facades had been upended in a single afternoon. Old patterns had been disrupted, new possibilities revealed. How are you feeling? David asked, reaching across to take my hand as we navigated the evening traffic, the hum of the engine a comforting drone. I considered the question carefully, letting the truth surface. Like something that was knotted for a very long time is finally starting to untangle, I said, a profound sense of relief washing over me. It's uncomfortable, David, painfully so at times, but it's also incredibly freeing. He smiled, squeezing my hand gently. Your grandmother is something else, you know that. A true force of nature, a quiet revolutionary. I laughed, a tired but genuine sound. Oh, I know, she's been waiting for this showdown for years, probably orchestrated the whole thing. Do you think things will actually change with Leo? He asked, his voice thoughtful. Or will it be back to the old dynamic in a week? I think they already have, I said thoughtfully, my gaze fixed on the road ahead. Whether those changes stick? Well, that's up to both of us. It'll be work, hard work, but I feel like we've finally laid the groundwork for a real relationship. Not just as siblings, but as two adults, with different strengths, who can respect each other. As we pulled into our driveway, the familiar comfort of home, I realized I felt lighter than I had in years. The truth, once spoken, had cleared away long-standing cobwebs of misunderstanding and resentment. There would be awkward moments ahead, undoubtedly. Old habits, like stubborn weeds, would try to reassert themselves. New boundaries would need to be established, sometimes clumsily, sometimes painfully. But for the first time since childhood, I felt a genuine, burgeoning hope for my relationship with my brother. Not as competitors, but as colleagues. Maybe even, dare I dream, collaborators, family. 3 months after that fateful Easter dinner, I found myself sitting across from Leo in the Horizon Innovations cafeteria. It had become our weekly ritual. Tuesday lunch, a quiet time to discuss the integration of ByteForge's technology into our main platform, and to catch up tentatively as siblings. Today, Leo was animatedly explaining a new approach to the algorithm that had been ByteForge's core innovation. His eyes, usually so serious, were bright with the familiar excitement that had always characterized him when discussing complex technical challenges. The processing speed has increased by 37%, Clara, he said, practically vibrating with enthusiasm, and Marcus thinks we can push it even further if we restructure the data pipeline. It's insane, I smiled, genuinely impressed. The technical side of things was still his domain, and he was brilliant at it. That's fantastic, Leo. Our enterprise clients will love that kind of performance boost. It's exactly what they've been asking for. It's actually building on something your data science team suggested, he admitted, a statement that would have been unthinkable 4 months ago. He even offered a slight self-deprecating shrug. Turns out there are some smart people here at the corporate sellout, Who knew? We both laughed, a shared easy sound, a reference to his former bitter dismissal of Horizon Innovations. It felt good, natural. In the 3 months since Leo had joined the company, I'd watched him slowly adapt to corporate culture. It hadn't been easy. There had been rough patches, certainly. His tendency to speak bluntly, to bypass established protocols, had ruffled some feathers in HR, and he'd initially bristled at the layers of approval required for even minor changes. He'd complained about meetings, about corporate jargon, about the sheer size of the organization. But he was learning. More surprisingly, he seemed to be enjoying the stability, the vast resources, and the collaborative environment a larger company provided. He was learning to be a team player. "How are things with Marcus?" I asked, referring to his direct manager, a patient, sharp-witted individual who had a knack for managing brilliant, difficult personalities. Leo considered the question, twirling a plastic fork. "Good, actually, really good. He knows his stuff and he doesn't micromanage, which is a blessing. I'm learning a lot about project management from him, about how to structure large-scale development sprints, and team leadership, still a work in progress," he admitted ruefully, a rare moment of self-awareness. "Turns out managing people requires skills I haven't fully developed yet. It's not just about code. It's about people." This self-awareness, this willingness to admit a skill deficit, was perhaps the most striking change in my brother. The Leo of 6 months ago would never have acknowledged any personal or professional weakness. "You'll get there," I assured him. "It takes time, and it takes practice. It's a completely different muscle." Our conversation drifted to family matters. Mom and Dad had visited the Horizon Innovations campus the previous week, a guided tour I had arranged. It had been a revelation for them, especially Dad, who had spent the entire tour alternating between proud exclamations about his children and confused questions about the technology. "I think they're still processing it all, Leo said, a small smile playing on his lips. 20 years of thinking I was the only tech person in the family, the only one building anything significant. And now they're trying to understand that you've been quietly outranking me for years." "Not outranking," I corrected gently, shaking my head. "Different paths, Leo, different skills, complementary skills." He nodded, acknowledging the distinction. "Fair enough. Speaking of family, are you free for dinner at Nana Rose's this weekend?" She specifically requested both of us, said she had a new recipe for pot roast. I smiled. Since Easter, our grandmother had become even more deliberate in fostering our rebuilt relationship, and gently nudging us toward continued connection. "Wouldn't miss it," I said. "That woman's cooking is worth any family therapy session she might have planned. Her pot roast is legendary." "She's subtle as a sledgehammer," Leo agreed affectionately, a touch of genuine warmth in his voice. "But effective, like her tactics at Easter." As we finished lunch and walked back toward our respective departments, me to my acquisitions team, him to his new integration project, I reflected on how much had changed in such a short time. Our relationship remained a work in progress, certainly. Decades of established patterns couldn't be undone in mere months, but each interaction felt more authentic than the last. There were still moments when Leo slipped into his old condescending tone when discussing technical matters, a residual habit. But now he caught himself, often with a sheepish smile and a quick correction. Similarly, I was learning to assert my expertise, rather than silently seething when overlooked, to speak my truth with confidence without apology. Our parents, too, were adapting to this new family dynamic. Mom had started asking specific questions about my work, making a genuine effort to understand what I did, to learn the jargon. Dad had begun forwarding me articles about women in tech leadership, his way of showing he recognized my place in that world, a silent apology for his past oversight. The most profound change, however, was internal. After years of diminishing my accomplishments, of trying to keep the peace in the family by staying quiet, by staying small, I was learning to take up space, to acknowledge my expertise, to correct misperceptions without apology. In professional settings, this newfound confidence translated to more effective leadership and clearer, more assertive communication with my team. It was like I'd found my voice, and it was stronger than I ever knew. The following weekend, as promised, Leo and I joined Nana Rose for dinner at her cozy apartment. After a delicious meal of her famous pot roast, she served coffee in her living room, settling into her favorite armchair and fixed us both with her characteristic direct gaze. "So," she said, her eyes twinkling mischievously, "how are my two tech executives getting along these days? Any corporate espionage I should know about?" Leo and I exchanged amused glances. "Subtlety isn't your strong suit, is it, Nana?" I teased. "At my age, dear, there's no time for beating around the bush," she replied, a twinkle in her eye. "Well, we're doing well," Leo answered, looking at me. "Better than I expected, honestly." "He's learning to accept feedback without taking it as a personal attack," I added with a smirk, nudging him lightly. "And she's learning to give feedback without sounding like a corporate training manual," Leo countered good-naturedly, rolling his eyes. Nana Rose smiled, satisfaction evident in her expression. "Good. Family should be honest with each other, but kindly so. That's the key." "I've been thinking about that a lot lately," I said, looking at her, then at Leo. "About honesty in families. For years, we all participated in this fiction that Leo was the only tech success story. Me by staying quiet about my achievements, Leo by exaggerating his, and the rest of the family by never questioning the narrative. It was comfortable. For me, anyway," Leo admitted, a flicker of his old defensiveness. "I got to be the star, the golden child." "And what have you learned from having that comfort disrupted?" Nana asked him, her gaze piercing. Leo considered the question seriously, his brow furrowed in thought. "That comfort isn't always growth," he said slowly. "That being the star kept me from learning things I needed to know about business, about leadership. And that," he glanced at me, a genuine warmth in his eyes, "that I missed out on a potential ally by treating my sister like a competitor. A really smart, really capable ally." Nana nodded approvingly before turning to me. "And you, Clara, what have you learned?" "That silence isn't actually peace," I said, the words coming easily, flowing from a place of deep understanding. "That diminishing myself to make others comfortable wasn't serving anyone, least of all me. And that authenticity, while sometimes uncomfortable, while sometimes disruptive, is the only way to be truly known and loved, to be truly seen." "Very good," Nana said, sounding exactly like the wise professor she once was, her voice filled with quiet pride. "Now the real test will be taking these lessons forward. Family patterns have a way of reasserting themselves if we're not vigilant. It's a constant, active choice." "We're working on it," I assured her. "Leo's actually been asking for my input on managing his team at Horizon Innovations, which is wild, by the way. And Clara's been consulting me on technical aspects of upcoming acquisitions," Leo added, a hint of his old swagger, but tempered with genuine respect. "Turns out our skills really do complement each other, as I've been saying for approximately 30 years, Nana noted dryly, raising an eyebrow at us both. We laughed, the sound of genuine affection filling the small apartment, warm and resonant. As the evening wound down and we prepared to leave, Nana Rose held both our hands in hers, her grip surprisingly strong. "I'm proud of you both," she said simply, her eyes bright with emotion. "Not just for your professional accomplishments, impressive as they are, but for doing the hard work of breaking unhealthy patterns. That takes more courage than any career achievement. That takes real growth." On the drive home, I found myself reflecting on her words. It had indeed taken courage to disrupt the comfortable fiction our family had maintained for years. But the freedom that came with authenticity, the profound sense of being truly known and accepted for who I was worth the temporary discomfort, worth the pain of confrontation. Leo and I would never have a perfect relationship. Siblings rarely do. We were too different in our approaches, too shaped by our individual experiences. But we had found a way to respect those differences rather than allowing them to divide us, to see them as complementary rather than competitive. In the tech industry, where change is the only constant, adaptability is essential for success. Leo and I had finally applied that principle to our personal relationship, to our family dynamics, and both were stronger for it. The truth, as it turned out, hadn't destroyed our family, as I'd feared it would. It had rebuilt it, piece by painful piece, on a more solid foundation, one where achievements weren't compared but celebrated, where differences weren't threats but assets, and where being known, truly known, was more important than being impressive. It was a lesson I carried forward into all aspects of my life, that authentic connections, built on honesty rather than performance, were the most valuable technology of all. Have you ever experienced a moment where standing in your truth changed a relationship for the better? A moment where you stopped dimming your light? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if you've enjoyed this journey of sibling rivalry turned collaboration, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories about navigating complex family dynamics. Share this video with someone who might need permission to shine their own light without dimming it for others. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the most important disruption isn't in technology, but in the patterns we've accepted for too long.